Welcome to Mom in Mind, where we dive into all aspects of perinatal mental health and wellness related to conception, pregnancy, birth, loss, postpartum, and new parenthood. We raise the volume on these topics in hopes that someday everyone will have the support and information that they deserve before they need it. Please note this podcast is not a replacement for treatment by a professional or professional training. Welcome back to Mom in Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. For Maternal Mental Health Month in May, we have a special project going on, and we'd like to hear your voice. We'd like to hear what you want to say to moms and families and partners about what you wish you would have known, the kind of support you would like to give them, and hopeful messages. If you would like to participate, I'm going to leave the contribution line open for another week until Monday, April 23rd. Please look in our show notes for a link on how to do this, or you can go to the Facebook page where I have instructions as well. I just think it's so important that we get to hear as many people's voices as possible in raising awareness and giving support to perinatal families. In this episode of Mom in Mind, we are talking with Dr. Alyssa Berlin. She's a clinical psychologist specializing in pregnancy, postpartum, and parenting, a labor and support doula, and the creator of the AfterBirth Plan workshop, a program that prepares couples for what to expect after a baby is born and how to prepare for a physically and emotionally healthy postpartum transition for the baby, for each partner, and the evolving relationship. Dr. Berlin is on the board of advisors for the International Cesarean Awareness Network, ICAN, and is a faculty member of Maternal Mental Health Now Training Institute. She conducts a multitude of live pregnancy and parenting workshops throughout Southern California and globally via Skype. You can read her blog on the Huffington Post, where she contributes to PBS's This Emotional Life project. She's a certified Gottman educator and a member of the American Psychological Association. Dr. Alyssa and her husband, prenatal chiropractor Dr. Elliot Berlin, live in Los Angeles and are the proud parents of 4 amazing children. In our episode today, we're going to be talking about why it's important to consider planning and preparing for life after the baby comes. It's one of those things that you realize after a baby comes that you could have really had some information beforehand to help you into the transition to parenthood. So we're going to talk about how you can get that information and why it's helpful for you. So let's welcome Dr. Berlin. Welcome, Dr. Berlin. Thanks so much for being with us.
Dr. Kat, how are you? It's a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. I'm doing really well, and I'm excited to talk with you. We've been trying to get together on this for a little while to talk about your awesome work with the AfterBirth Plan. So I'm excited to share with the listeners what you've been working on, and we can help them.
You're so sweet.
Oh, thanks. So go ahead and let us know a bit about your work.
So, and it's funny, right? Because like you said, we've been having a hard time getting together, but as with the whole birth and postpartum time, like everything happens in the right time. So I'm really excited also that we're talking now. And it's very interesting because, most people are very well versed with a birth plan. It's something that's very prevalent, especially here in LA. But unfortunately, there's not the same consideration given to, well, now this baby is here and what do I do?
Right.
And it's long since changed, that notion that, there's no manual and you just have to jump in and wing it. We know that that's not the case. And there's tons and tons of research to support that if parents or parents-to-be know what to expect and prepare for it, that they can really ease that transition into parenthood.
Right.
And that was really the thinking behind the AfterBirth Plan. So you have your birth plan and that's great. What's your AfterBirth plan?
Yes.
And as much as possible, people will sometimes come across the class and be like, after I have the baby, I'm going to look you up. And I'm like, no. I want you looking me up while you're still pregnant. Because, and I'll use the analogy all the time. We don't wait for the fire to be raging to say, gosh, what's my fire drill plan? Or how are we going to exit this building? It's stuff that we have already ready to go so that should a crisis hit, we're prepared. And more than preparing for a crisis, I want people to be prepared for what that normal transition looks like and how to help facilitate it being easier and inherently more enjoyable.
That's awesome and fantastic. And I really wish that everybody could know that they could benefit from this and know that it's something that they potentially need. But like you were saying, there was this old idea that, there is no manual and whatnot. And with that, there was also an idea that, well, you just figure it out and you do figure it out, but you're saying you don't have to figure everything out on your own in a vacuum, that you can get tips and pointers and kind of see what's coming before it comes.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I love what you said, because you hit upon something that I find comes up a lot, which is this notion that, some of the OBs that I work with will say, yes, when I identify a client who seems to be struggling, I'll hand her your card. And I feel like we're missing the boat with that. Yeah. It's the kind of class that I want all parents to be doing. Mm-hmm. We don't want to isolate or pick out someone who seems to be struggling, because you and I both know that postpartum comes in all shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
And why would we cripple anyone with not having that knowledge and that experience and that information at their disposal?
Right.
And it's really interesting because, I feel like so often parents feel like, because you said, they'll figure it out. And yes, people do. And I feel like where there's a lot of resistance, or what's a new idea sometimes, is this notion that you don't have to take the hardest possible path. There's no blue ribbon at the end that says, I did this and I felt every ache and pain and I really sweated it out. There's nothing like that. And so why not access the wisdom and the information and the research that's in existence that can maybe make that process a whole lot easier for you?
How about that? Yes,
right?
Let's do that. Why not? It sounds great. And I love that you framed it, and not that something's wrong, so you have to do this. I mean, there's a lot of prevention in there. There's a lot of just, hey, this could be helpful, and not necessarily that you're going to have a hard time, but boy, this could make it a lot easier.
For sure. And we're planning for normal. And interestingly enough, I've had a lot of couples who have taken the workshop, because I really like to work with a couple, right? People oftentimes, again, have that misnomer that if postpartum happens, that it's either the birthing partner's issue or it's mom's issue. And we know that it's not the case. It's a family concern. But I've had so many couples say that it's helped them years down the road, because so much of what we focus on is the couple. How do we strengthen the couple so that they are more prepared for not only dealing with baby, but for normal life? So yeah, let's destigmatize it. Let's remove that pathology. And sure, there is that prevention piece. And there is the piece where we go through what to expect with perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. But yes, we're planning for the normal. And then we're preparing for should the abnormal happen.
All right. I have a curiosity around this. I have a couple of questions in terms of, and I'll ask them separately. First, I'll ask, what is couples postpartum preparation? What are you doing to help them?
Sure. So it's always interesting, because I used to do a workshop that would span weeks, and we would devote hours to it. And, at the end of 12 hours, couples would leave. But it's really hard to get people to sign up at the get-go for 12 hours of prevention.
Right.
So we did away with that, right? In our busy days, no one was interested. And so what I've done is I've condensed the program to about a 2.5-hour workshop. Nice. So people come one night with their partner, and there are 3 main parts to it. The first part is, what are real expectations of what that transition to parenthood looks like? Not the myths, not the doom and gloom that people like to share of, oh, you'll never sleep again, but what can you really expect with that transition? We've all been there. We've all heard it, right?
Right.
So the second part of the workshop is centered around this relationship escalator that I created. So in my mind, when I think about relationships are like walking up and down escalator. So if we think about it, right? Think about it. If we're not actively investing in that relationship on a day-to-day and sometimes moment-to-moment basis, then life will naturally bring us down and bring us apart. So
That's
we know.
Lovely. Yeah.
Thank you. And I use that analogy. And what happens when we have that baby is that escalator speeds up. And it requires us to really double and sometimes triple our efforts that we devote to the relationship, so that it doesn't become a casualty of parenthood. And so I took it that next step to say, well, what are the things that help us climb that relationship and maintain a closeness and a connection with our partner? And what are the things that pull us down that escalator and create that divisiveness and that distance that can oftentimes set in after we have a baby?
Right.
And then the third part of the workshop is, again, what is postpartum depression? or what are perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, so that everyone can be informed and educated and on the same page. So should it happen, they all, have this comfort of, I know what this is, right? Dr. Berlin talked about this and we know what to do.
Right.
So it doesn't have to be that experience of hitting from behind. And we can avoid a lot of quote unquote well-meaning but misplaced support that oftentimes happens in relationships when it hasn't been identified yet that there's a disorder happening. Right? Those well-meaning people who say, just get over it. If you just hold the baby, you'll be fine. Like how to just, from the beginning, kind of do away with some of that. So that's really the structure of it.
Oh, that's awesome. It sounds really rich. It sounds like a good exploration of what people are going to need going into postpartum. I think, I have a question too around, well, how do you get people to know that this is something that they should be doing and something that they need to do? Because I so often hear people saying, well, we'll be fine. We'll figure it out. We don't need that kind of stuff. And I think, wow, things could be so much easier if you just had a little bit of preparation. How do you talk to people about this and help them understand why, even if they are doing fine, this could be beneficial to them?
Absolutely. And Dr. Kat, when you figure that out, you let me know.
I'm working on it.
And let's work on that together. Sure. Because it's definitely an ongoing process. What has been really helpful, because a big part of it is destigmatizing the experience. And so often people have that misconception, like we were talking about at the beginning, that, if I'm not struggling, I'm going to be fine. And not many people know that, upwards of 2/3 of couples do experience a decline in their relationship satisfaction after having a baby. And I am a big believer that anything that more than 70% of the population is doing now has become the norm. So it's not that there's something wrong with you, as people might fear, or there's something wrong with their relationship, but that it's a hard adjustment.
Right.
And whenever we add a new person to the family, there's some pushing and shoving and bumps and bruises that's normal. And if we can destigmatize it, we can make it a lot more readily available. So what I've done to that end is I've really started to partner with a lot of OBs, because I feel like for the community to buy in, it needs to come from the doctors. That if the doctors are starting to share with their clients that this is an important part of your prenatal care, well, now it's not there's something wrong with me and she's signaling me out, but it's, if I'm going to be an informed individual and have comprehensive prenatal care, I need to think about postpartum. And what I was going to say is, and again, this is where I would love that help, but I would really, really like to see happen. And whenever I work with clients, I'm like, go back to your OB and tell them. But I would love for it to catch on that we make, like, let's say week 28 of pregnancy, postpartum check-in week. And I would love to see it truly be mainstream that at week 28, we all do something to prepare for postpartum. And if you think about it, doctors don't ask clients, for the most part, do you want to check and see if your blood sugar is high? It's just, we're going to check your blood sugar now.
Exactly.
And doctors don't say, hey, do you want to check the position of the baby? And now it's time to check. And if we can get doctors on board with, and now it's time to think about what's going to be when this baby is born, we really just alleviate a lot of that anxiety that people feel about, well, what does it mean about me if I do this? So that's my goal. That's what I would love
I'm on
to
board.
happen.
Let's do that.
Okay. So that's all I need.
Okay. I love that, because like you said, you're just putting it into the flow of things as a normal part, and it should be a normal part. There's so much planning and preparation that goes into birth, and fine, that's great. Awesome. But what you're doing is you're filling a major gap by helping the continuity of someone's experience so that they're getting the care they need throughout, planning ahead, preparing, just thinking through a couple of really essential things. And I think
Thank you.
It's great, because let's say a couple does go through the AfterBirth Plan workshop, and then they do run into some problems in the postpartum, but they have already been introduced to that as a possibility, like, oh, she said that this might happen, so this is what this is. Just like you were describing before, how much less stress they have, because so many moms now think it's just me. What did I do wrong? Or my partner isn't there for me. Why don't they understand me? That kind of stuff. You're just taking out all of those factors before it even happens.
For sure. If you think about what is probably the single most comforting thing that moms or couples get out of a mommy and me group, it's that normalizing, that feeling of, oh, it's not just me, it's you too. And so like you said, for couples to be able to say, oh, Dr. Berlin talked about that, right? That's normal. That was to be expected. It does. It alleviates a lot of that concern. And I also find, it's hard for any of us to seek help when we feel like we're at our lowest, when we don't feel like we're ourselves, and we don't want that to be someone's first impression of us.
Right.
And I find that people are much more readily willing to pick up that phone a whole lot faster if we've met beforehand, because we already have that connection and it alleviates all of those concerns. And now it's like, hey, remember when you talked about X? I think that might be happening. Can we talk more about that? And it changes the experience in a really profound way.
Wow. That's fantastic. Have you had any feedback from people who did have a perinatal mental health issue, who talked about what their experiences was like after having gone through the workshop? Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Absolutely.
Do you feel like you can speak to that?
Yeah, I can. You were talking about the idea of preparing for the birth, which is important, but also giving some thought, not having that occupy all your brain cells, and giving some thought to what happens after. And something that I think a lot of us use, and definitely something that I will share with clients all the time, is it's kind of the distinction of preparing for the wedding versus thinking about the marriage, and really encouraging people to think about that also in this situation, that however long and arduous that birth might be, it's still a finite moment, right? It's a day or two. But then let's not just focus on Labor Day, but really think about what that parenthood journey is like, because that's really the bigger journey or the bigger piece of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really love that analogy of, the wedding and then the marriage and the labor and then the life with a child, because there's all this buildup for the day of, and you're really talking about giving attention to the whole process and how to more easily integrate when coming home. In particular, thinking of moms who are dealing with perinatal mental health challenges, whether they expected to or not, or surprised by it or not. What have you heard? What have the feedback been for you from moms who ended up having a perinatal mental health challenge and also went through the AfterBirth workshop?
Right. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking. One thing that many couples have echoed was this notion that they felt comfortable reaching out for help a whole lot sooner than they thought they might have otherwise done. And that hearing about the information and being exposed to it made it a lot easier to pick up that phone and access help. Right. And we know the earlier that, mom or dad gets help, the faster that they do recover and can return to enjoying that sweet little baby of theirs. The other really big thing that I've heard is that there was a better matchup of the non-birthing partner or dad being able to offer the kind of help that mom needed. And Dr. Kat, you'll tell me what your experience is, but my experience has been, for the most part, right? And I'm not saying that this is for everyone, but that for a lot of men, I found that when it comes to, perinatal, that men make really great soldiers, in the sense that they may not be sure what needs to be done, but if someone could tell them and give them that direction, they're so happy to do it.
Right. Yeah, I would agree.
And that's been really helpful, because so often as women, we feel like, well, they should know what to do, right? They just had a baby also. Why aren't they jumping in and helping me?
Right.
And many men will say, well, gosh, I'm helping her so much, but she's just not appreciating anything that I'm doing, because there's often this mismatch between what mom is needing and what dad is thinking might be helpful. But if we sometimes think about that men make really good soldiers, well, then women are a lot more likely to be able to offer them those directives, knowing that dad is wanting to help, but is just needing some guidance there.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it. I do see that a lot in terms of, well, I feel like I'm helping, but then she tells me that I'm not doing it right, or that I need to do a different way. And then I feel like, okay, well, then I'm just not going to do it. Or, just kind of feeling lost. Some guys have never been around babies, and some partners have never been around babies and don't know what to do and prefer to have some kind of direction. I think where it gets really challenging is sometimes when there are like deeper rooted, maybe cultural issues or really kind of traditional male-female role type things, where I think that having an afterbirth workshop would help people who are kind of in the more traditional gender role type of a situation, help to see how they could be helpful or why kind of breaking from tradition could be useful here, that kind of stuff. Because sometimes I try and say to the moms, like say in my group, like, hey, have your partner come in, or hey, there's this class for them. And there's sort of a pushback from the partner who's like, well, I don't want anybody to tell me how to raise my child. And, that's right. Like stuff that you're supposed to do. And so I think a little bit of information, maybe I'll say it that way, a little bit of information on how and why it could be helpful both to the partner to be teaming up in a different kind of way could actually help them too reduce the stress in the house.
Absolutely. And, the piece that I didn't mention, which might be prudent, is that I've created an actual afterbirth plan. So at the end of the workshop, couples, whether traditional or not traditional, do get an actual document, which is their afterbirth plan, that they then get to fill out. And what's really nice about it, and I encourage the couples to do it, should do it during pregnancy. Mm-hmm. What's really nice about it is that it's a time to start to think through what they may need and to really have some of those conversations around culture and diversity and, the family that I grew up with and what I want to do for our baby and the family you grew up with. And to start to think through some of these things in a way that feels super helpful, because it is challenging. And like you said, even if two people grow up down the street from each other and went to the same place of worship and went to the same school all their life, every relationship is a cross-cultural experience because our own family has a culture of how we do things.
Right.
And sometimes we don't even realize the expectations we're coming in with that we want for our babies. Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's when we get in the most trouble. It was like, oh, wait, you wanted to do X? Like that was never on my radar.
Totally. Yes. Yeah.
So let's start having those conversations before baby is here when tensions are low. People are hopefully sleeping a little bit better than what might happen after, right? And it's a good starting point. And we know things will change 1,000 times over after that baby is really here.
Right.
But it's a place to start. And I feel like when we're in that place and our partner knows that we're trying to work on it and be sensitive, we're given a lot more latitude, even if we get it wrong.
Right. Exactly. Because otherwise it can really fall into this kind of competition. Well, I'm doing this and you're doing that, or that kind of thing. And that just makes everything feel so much worse. Yeah.
100%.
Right. So just how you were saying that sometimes people will expect, because they are sort of have similar upbringings, that they're going to raise their kids in similar ways. That is such a good point, because just in terms of the competition, avoiding the competition, well, I want to do it this way, or you want to do it that way, or I'm doing more than you. I mean, you're really talking about naming that stuff on some level, but in a really supportive way. Let's call this out and see what it is, and then come to a different agreement, because who can really have that discussion when you're tired, when you're sleep deprived and just trying to figure out how to change a diaper or whatever. Yeah. Work that stuff out before. Yeah. That's great.
For sure. And you're really hitting upon, because I knew that you and I were very aligned already, but you're hitting upon a lot of the things that I have in that relationship escalator. So I usually refer to it as the daily diaper tally. Right? Awesome. Something that really brings us apart, where we get into this place that we think that we're being that quote unquote team. But if you think about an actual team, teams don't keep score of what members do on the field. Right? So I'm a little sports challenged, but when you're on the baseball field, right? When you're in the field, no one's going to not catch a ball that's coming their way because they caught the ball right before, so it's someone else's turn.
Oh my gosh. Right? I love this. Yes.
100%. But when it comes to the diapers, it's like, I've done 3. It's your turn. I'm not touching another diaper until you've done your 3.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you look at that analogy of that person who steps away from that ball and you're like, no, that doesn't work. That doesn't happen. That's not being a team.
Right, right.
And so it's helping people, like you said, kind of see through no, we're a team. But if you're keeping that daily diaper tally, you've missed the point of the team. And we want to re-examine that.
Right. That's so lovely. I really like how you put things into very easy to conceptualize ways because, right, I mean, once you give the analogy, it makes perfect sense. Like, okay, maybe we need to change bases right now, but we're still on the same team. And yeah, that's so usable. And I think that's what people need is really down to earth, simple, usable ways to think through these kind of complicated emotional life changes that are happening.
For sure. And Dr. Kat, I'm totally going to borrow that. But yes, and that's the premise of the workshop, right? And I'll start with the workshop and I'll say, there's nothing here that's rocket science.
Right.
And if anything, we do a whole lot better by going back to basics and recognizing that for the stability and the connection within a relationship, we need to take the time to slow down and to talk and make sure we don't lose sight of this priority. Long before baby was ever a thought, usually, it was just the 2 partners. And we don't want to lose sight of that hierarchy. And it's important.
Right.
So 100%, just going back to some of those basics, really simplifying. So thank you for that. I try to use analogies that people can really conceptualize and relate to. And what I love about and why I use an escalator in particular is that if you think about it, taking steps up an escalator, they're just steps. They're not big, giant leaps. Right. Most of us feel like, sure, I could take a step. And that I want people to really recognize that small steps in the right direction can lead to some pretty massive payoff. So it's not big, it's not daunting, it is so doable if we just slow down and educate ourselves, like you were saying, or inform ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds totally approachable and like a great idea. A great idea.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're awesome.
Oh, you're awesome. Well, so in terms of feedback, what have you heard from people who've been through the AfterBirth Plan workshop and how it's helped them in general?
So some of the biggest feedback that I've gotten have been that couples feel like they're able to really be that team, right? Not get stuck down that daily diaper tally kind of vibe, but really feel like they were able to approach parenthood from that collective team perspective, and that it really facilitated their capacity to not get stuck in the bumps, but really enjoy the experience, that they felt more prepared to know how to support each other, as well as to take time and permission to take care of themselves. So although we didn't talk about it, so self-care is something that I really promote, and self-care is something that we want to do from the get-go. It's not something that we do when things get hectic.
Right.
And it's helping people to give themselves permission that by taking care of themselves, they're really not only helping themselves, but they're helping the whole family unit. So it's not a guilty pleasure. It's not them being selfish.
Right.
It's self-care. And there's a distinction. And I feel like, and this could be another whole podcast, I'm sure, but especially within our society, I find women in particular have a really hard time with this idea of self-care. And very quickly it crosses over into, no, but I'm being selfish, but I should want to be with the baby all the time. I shouldn't need to take care of me. And, once you're enjoying my analogies, I'll throw one last one in there.
Yes.
Where we all use the airplane, that you need to put your air mask on first before you can take care of other people. And I'll usually take it one step farther. And I'll say, so I have 4 kids, right? And I would never sit down at my kitchen table with my 4 kids watching and say, hi, guys, I see that you're all hungry, but you know what? So is mommy. So as soon as mommy's done eating, well, then I'll feed you, right? We would never do that. Yet, to a certain degree, maybe I should, right? Because if I'm coming to that table hungry and ragged and in a terrible mood because I haven't taken care of myself, what am I really going to offer them? Like, let's be honest, right? I'm going to be snippy. It doesn't work. So we really do need to care for ourselves first.
Yeah.
And so one of the best things that I hear from people after they've taken the workshop is they will share with me with such pride that they're taking care of themselves, and they've created a ritual around what they do for themselves and how impactful it's been to be able to then jump back into the family unit. So that's one of the nicest ones that I hear.
That's fantastic.
And it's true for mom and dad. I don't want dads to think that they're being left out. They need that same self-care as mom does. So, equal opportunity here.
Right. Absolutely. And I appreciate you bringing that in there too. I mean, the self-care being equated with selfishness is sort of rampant. And I love that you were addressing it head on and giving people permission, I guess, to, if you want to call it that, that they should be doing the self-care. But even more importantly, partners, dads, that they need their own self-care. And I think because a lot of attention goes to baby and birthing mom, they can be left out sometimes. And that in and of itself can impact the relationship too. So I really love that you emphasize that both partners need their own time. That's just awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Berlin, for coming on with us and sharing the work that you're doing and how you're helping couples and families through this transition into parenthood.
Oh, you are so sweet. It was truly my pleasure. It's such a wonderful podcast that you have and such a service that you're offering to families everywhere. So thank you for what you do.
Oh, thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to hearing future podcasts and just staying connected.
Okay, so now we know that really planning for birth and planning for postpartum, planning for that transition to parenthood is very important. And it's really something that we too often overlook. So I'm glad to get you guys some more information about why it's important and the things that you could look forward to if you find this type of support near you. Please join us at momandmind.com on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Or if you'd like to come into our Facebook group at Mom and Mind Connection, we'd love to have you there, where we can deepen our discussions of what we talk about here on the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time. Thank you for joining us today. Please share this podcast. Together, we can support moms and families so that no one has to deal with this alone. Come connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at Mom and Mind.